Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're not just swapping scary stories to give you the creeps. We are actually dissecting the raw, unfiltered psychology of how the human brain completely malfunctions when faced with pure terror. We're going to dive into some genuine accounts, from supernatural anomalies to very real, very human predators, and really analyze the shared psychological patterns across these incredibly unsettling encounters. All right, picture this. You're working as a night security guard at an isolated logistics warehouse right on the outskirts of Phoenix. It's 1:40 a.m. You are completely alone. Suddenly, your radio crackles, and a voice whispers, "I see you." You search the dark property, only to find a plain box left right on your desk. As you reach for your phone to call the police, you hear a noise. You slowly turn around, and a hand is sticking out from behind the door, pointing a pistol directly at you. A man's voice breaks the silence. Damn, you're already dead. So take a second, ask yourself, what would you actually do in that exact moment? Would you run, fight, or would you just freeze? It's so easy for us to sit back and say, oh, I totally spring into action. But the reality of human fear responses is far more complex and honestly kind of bizarre. When the brain confronts something it just cannot instantly comprehend, our survival instincts often get completely short-circuited. When you look at the sheer chaos of these 6 true encounters, some really clear patterns start to emerge. We've mapped out the stories, the threat types, ranging from human to supernatural, and the victim's very first reactions. Just look at the wild diversity here. We've got the copycat entity resulting in a freeze response, the theater and old woman encounters resulting in politeness, the warehouse stalker and the bus stop shadow man triggering immediate flight, and then the phantom roommate causing the brain to frantically try and rationalize. As we move through this explainer, you'll see exactly how predictable these initial reactions actually are. Act 1, the trap of politeness.
Okay, let's dive into this first major psychological pattern we pulled from the source material. It is honestly shocking how frequently our social conditioning completely overrides our innate survival instincts. We're taught from a very young age to be helpful, to not make a scene and to give people the benefit of the doubt. Well, this deeply ingrained social conditioning creates a massive vulnerability. In the face of glaring, blazing red flags, victims will literally put themselves in mortal danger just to avoid seeming rude.
Let's look at a couple of unbelievable examples from our sources. On one side, we have 2 sisters alone in an apartment. A hollow-cheeked old woman knocks on their door, claiming her daughter is in the hospital and begging to use their phone. She hands them this battered, decade-old mobile phone that is clearly 100% dead. Yet, out of pity and politeness, the younger sister actually invites this deeply unsettling stranger inside. On the flip side, we have a theatergoer whose seat is violently kicked by a hulking, scarred man. The man points to his shoe, revealing a hidden knife, and gestures for silence. And what does the victim do? They just stay in their seat. I mean, just think about the sheer absurdity of this rationalization. Not wanting to cause trouble unnecessarily, I decided to focus on the play. The victim sat there next to an armed, threatening stranger in the dark. It wasn't until the theater lights went out during a scene and the victim felt the cold blade of the knife actually touch the back of their neck that their flight instinct finally broke through that social conditioning and they sprinted out of the building. Act 2, the freeze and the rational brain. Now, shifting gears from tangible human threats to the supernatural, we see how desperately the human brain tries to forcefully process impossible anomalies. When confronted with the impossible, the brain goes through this fascinating 3-step sequence. First, the anomaly appears. Take the story of the 11-year-old girl who woke up at 4 a.m. Step 1, she sees a figure standing in her doorway with a blank face and one unnaturally open eye. Step 2, the brain tests reality. Instead of screaming, she freezes, mirrors the entity's expression, and literally starts making faces at it to test if it's just her dad playing a sick prank. And then, step 3 is the reality drop. It's that horrifying moment when her brain realizes her dad could never hold a straight face that long. The logic completely fails and the true terror sets in. And this brilliantly illustrates the insane lengths our brains will go to just to find logic where there is none. Take a look at this comparison. We have the copycat victim assuming a terrifying hallway entity is just a parent. Then we have the 18-year-old girl living completely alone. At 1 a.m., she physically feels someone sleeping beside her on her pillow. When she wakes up and sees no one, she inexplicably gets out of bed and checks under it for a roommate. The catch? She didn't even have a roommate. Her brain actually preferred the idea of a hiding roommate over the horrifying reality of a paranormal encounter. Let's break down the data from these 6 encounters. Notice that even split. only 33% of our victims had an immediate flight response. That was the security guard at the warehouse and a 7-year-old girl at a bus stop. A massive 67% of victims initially reacted with either freeze or social compliance. The unknown and the supernatural overwhelmingly triggered a paralyzed, rationalizing brain, while clear human threats triggered either politeness or, thankfully, a really fast exit.
Act 3. Human predators versus the unknown.
We really need to look at the stark psychological contrast between facing a tangible, deadly human being versus an unexplainable, supernatural presence. The warehouse stalker represents a clear, definitive physical danger. The security guard knows what a gun is, he knows what murder is. But contrast that with a bus stop encounter. A 7-year-old girl is waiting for her mom when a dark, silent man suddenly materializes out of the shadows across the street. He doesn't move, he just watches. Later, when the panicked mother arrives, the man points toward where the girl ran, speaks one sentence, and then completely vanishes. Not walks away, vanishes. See, human threats carry a twisted but ultimately understandable motive. The warehouse stalker left a note inside that plain box. It read, "From now on, it's just you and me, a one-on-one gunfight. Let's see who survives in this warehouse before dawn." It is absolutely terrifying, yes, but it is a known quantity. It's a psychopath wanting a twisted game. You can wrap your head around that.
So here's the absolutely crucial point. Human threats offer definitive terror, while the supernatural offers endless, unresolvable ambiguity. The security guard? He called the cops, hid under his desk, and quit his job that very day. He removed himself from the threat. But victims of the unknown, they don't get that luxury. They're left with lingering questions, constantly second-guessing their own sanity, and they receive absolutely zero definitive closure. The weight of the unknown. Let's examine the lasting psychological footprint these terrifying encounters left behind. Because a single terrifying encounter permanently alters a person's baseline sense of safety. And the real-world coping mechanisms, they vary drastically. The guard quit his job immediately. The theater victim completely avoided that venue forever. The girl with the phantom roommate started keeping a holy Bible right by her bed just to feel protected. And the sisters who let the old woman in, they were left carrying this heavy, quiet feeling of constantly being watched in their own home. Just think about the lasting image permanently burned into the minds of those sisters. A maid had told them the old woman lived entirely alone, yet they had heard what sounded like a room full of men laughing in her flat. Later that night, at 2 a.m., during a violent thunderstorm, one sister looked up to the apartment above. The old woman was standing in the window, illuminated by lightning flashes, staring down at them without blinking. The curtain slammed shut, and she was literally never seen again. But that presence, that weight, never left the apartment. The 19-year-old who experienced the copycat entity in her home summed up this psychological toll perfectly in her Source interview. She said, "I try to explain it away, but deep down I know there's no logical explanation. You know, you can tell yourself it was just a laundry basket or just a weird trick of the light, but the brain knows when it's encountered something that breaks the fundamental rules of reality." We've seen how our minds default to politeness, how we completely freeze up, and how we desperately try to rationalize the paranormal. But I'll leave you with this final thought to consider. If the absolute impossible stood at your doorway at 4 a.m. tonight, staring back at you, what lie would your brain tell you to help you survive? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and hey, keep your eyes open.